Hi everybody, this is the Baseball Hut, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the People's Champion, your host, the Hunter. Welcome back to the Baseball Hut 2. And of course, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. We're talking about the Chicago White Sox. Why? Well, they just ended one of the worst streaks in the history of baseball. They just finished losing 21 games in a row. How do you do that? Well, it's funny you should ask. This is this White Sox team. These losses, these 21 games that they lost, and they won last night to the A's. They won last night to the A's. This is putting them on pace to have the worst record in baseball history. And as you know, the worst record in baseball history is the 1962 lovable Mets. They were lovable for different reasons. This team is not lovable. This team is terrible. White Sox, I mean, the Mets in 62, they were entertaining in their utility. This team is not fun. They don't have a fun manager. And you can see, to be honest with you, not having a Hall of Fame manager the last 2 years, how this thing has completely collapsed. One of many reasons, obviously. A lot of reasons here. The White Sox have been run very poorly, very dysfunctionally for quite the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, it started with them bringing in Tony La Russa, who is a Hall of Fame manager. He had a good first year. In 2021, they won 93 games. I mean, had a great year. That's as about as good of a year as you're going to get, but the media hated him there. And he was getting up there in age. In 2022, they didn't play nearly as well. He was out for a good portion of the season, taking care of his health issues. And they won 81 games. Last year, they were terrible. And now this year, they are historically terrible. And are flirting with the idea of being the worst team ever. Ever. And I would mention this about this historically poor run. I saw this earlier. They've lost 10 of the 21 games that the White Sox had lost. During this streak, they had a lead in the 6th inning or later. So their bullpen blew 10 of the 21 wins. Well, 10 possible wins into 10 losses, which added to the 21 losses. You know, it's a lot of work to lose 10 games in a row. We've seen this with a lot of teams if you're a fan of any team. But to lose, you know how much hard work you got to do? How much things fall apart when you lose 21 in a row? My goodness. But this team's going to get awfully close to 120 losses. Right now, if they go 11-33, they will finish at 39-123, which is what they are on pace to doing. They're on pace to losing 123 games. That will absolutely shatter the 120 loss season of the 1962 Mets, and the losses will be worse than the 62 Mets. That means they would have lost one less and lost more. One less and lost more than any team in the history of baseball. This is from the Bleacher Report. Ending historic losing streak can't save the 2024 White Sox from all-time worst label. Now, we've seen teams get awfully close to this 120 losses. The Tigers did that back in 2003. They came awfully close. The Baltimore Orioles, before they started getting good, were getting awfully close. They lost 115 games, 105 games, 110 games. The Astros came awfully close. But to lose this many games in this day and age, there is no excuse for this. And here's the thing about the White Sox, and I learned this yesterday from somebody at work, that the White Sox do not get any kind of good draft pick. Because they were in the draft lottery last year, and they're quote-unquote a big market team, they get penalized. So the best that they can do for next year is get a number 10 pick overall. So there's a 120-game lost season will get them nothing next year. The last big player that was brought in after a bad season was the Tigers, and they brought in Justin Verlander the following year when they drafted him number 1. There is no Justin Verlander for the Chicago White Sox next year. Their number 10 pick, they better make sure they get it right. If not, there's no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. The 2024 MLB season isn't likely to produce any all-time great teams. The bar for entry to that club is at 100 wins, and not one team is on that kind of pace. But an all-time bad team, well, funny you should mention, Chicago White Sox have that covered. In the interest of full disclosure, I wrote the bulk of this column before the White Sox beat the Oakland Athletics, who were bad last year, historically bad, but not like this. They looked bad in the first half. They looked like they were going to shatter 120 losses. But they picked it up in the second half. One win wasn't going to save them after all, whereas a loss would further solidify them in infamy. As luck would have, the White Sox did indeed earn the W with the 21-game losing streak. The proceeded lives on in spirit. I mean, what a great way to say it. The anatomy of the White Sox streak is enthralls and gizzards. They tied for the longest skid in American League history, trailing on the 1961 Philadelphia Phillies' 23 straight losses, the MLB record. They were outscored 136-49, an average of 4.1 runs per game. Wow. Lest anyone forget, these White Sox were 40 games under 500 when this skid began. They could have been kicked out of MLB even then, if only by more on that later, and there would have been no great loss. They're now 60 games under 500. At 28-88, the White Sox are on pace for 123 losses. At best, they are one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball history. No, they would be the worst, which is what they said. The 24 White Sox are uniquely terrible. Granted, the White Sox 241 winning percentage is only the 10th worst in MLB history, dating back to 1876. And if they do lose 123 games, the all-time record will still belong to the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, which became the Naps and the Guardians. I mean, the Naps, the Indians, and the Guardians, who lost 134. But how relevant should baseball's ancient history be under the circumstances? The Spiders went defunct after 1899, and it wasn't until 1901 that the American League and National League joined forces to form MLB as we know it. In this span, the 2024 White Sox winning percentage becomes the second worst ever after the 1916 Philadelphia Athletics. They're also the matter of the relativity of the White Sox badness, which is where standard score can help. A statistic that captures how far from the average a specific data point in a set is. The lower the higher the score, the more of an outlier the point is. Using winning percentage, here are the teams with the worst standard scores in MLB history. Number 1, 2024 Chicago White Sox at 3.3, negative 3.3. The 2003 Detroit Tigers, negative 2.84. The 1996 Detroit Tigers, a negative 2.80. The 1962 New York Mets, 2.60. The 1916 Philadelphia Athletics, 2.59. But boy, you got some historically bad teams. This has been an unmitigated disaster. And the thing is they've been run so poorly. Folks, that's really what it comes down to. They've been run so poorly. From the top, all the way from ownership, really. Jerry Reinsdorf has been the owner. He's been there forever. Been there 40-something years. I mean, you would not remember that the White Sox won in 2005. Does anybody remember that they won the World Series in 2005? My goodness. And he's the one that hired Tony La Russa to come back to the White Sox after he'd been out of baseball for 15 years and was a White Sox manager 40 years ago. Now, Tony did a great job. Like I said, the first year, they were 93-69 in 2021. But then they were a 500 team last year. And the last 2 years, obviously, been a disaster. The front office has been run by Ken Williams, who's been, I think he's a former major leaguer. He was a former Major League White Sox pitcher. And then they brought in Rick Hahn. But then, instead of bringing in a new evaluator for the club, they hired the assistant general manager, Chris Getz. And they need to get somebody else. He's a disaster. You know, what a disaster. My goodness. I mean, this is just poorly run organization. They brought in a Pedro Grifo, who's been a disaster as a manager. There's no accountability from him. The team don't respect him. From what I've seen, from all the little things that I've seen online about him, his players don't respect him. They don't play hard. It's just been an unmitigated disaster. Now I know Tommy Pham came out the other day, saying good things about the manager. But when you do not play hard in a game, that is on the manager more than any other person in the field or in the dugout. We're gonna keep an eye on this. This is a historically significant thing because if the White Sox break that 120 game loss season, but the 62 Mets, that is a modern record that's going to be broken. And the 62 Mets have had this sort of moniker for 60 years of being the worst team ever. But they had good players on that team. I mean, they had really great players that were way past their prime. They had Gil Hodges. Frank Thomas was a good player. The original Frank Thomas. Roger Craig became a good pitcher with the Cardinals. You got some guys there that had careers. Don Zimmer was a third baseman with the Dodgers. So they had players that were good. They were past their prime, but that was a disaster of another sort. But they were entertaining in this, and they're losing. This team is not entertaining. They're just terrible. Well, and they have a bad bullpen, which most bad teams have anyway. But let me know what you think about this video. Of course, please subscribe to Baseball Hut 2, and I'll see you later.